it's a very, very difficult time, especially for parents. Horrendous. Can't even imagine what that feels like. But as the nurse, I think it's just so important to try and get it right and be yourself, really support the parents as much as possible. But it's okay to cry, it's okay to show your emotion and the fact that you care deeply for them and for the baby. And there's only one chance to get it right and do the best you can for that family, because they're never going to forget that.
You're ever like really prepared, are you, for losing a baby? It's not something that ever really crosses your mind. And I think even though like both ours were really preterm, I know for me I was naive enough, I guess you could say, to think that medicine would save him and would kind of make everything all right.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, I just thought as long as they were born breathing and alive, then they would be fine, that the same that the doctors would be able to save them. We obviously had our twin transferred to a different hospital because he needed an operation, and during that time on the intensive care unit we saw quite a lot of parents, and it was obvious that they were spending the last sort of few hours or days with their baby. And I remember as sort of the days went on thinking, you know, how would we deal with that as a family? And thinking, for me, all I was really worried about, I kept thinking, how will Ben take it?
I think as the nurse, it's a very, very difficult situation to be in, but we're privileged, I think, to be in that situation and to make it the best that you possibly can for that family, because they'll always remember us for that.
I remember sitting watching these mums and dads getting upset, and I just kept thinking, right, if this happens to us, what will I be like? What will I have to do for Ben? Never really gave myself much thought, because I just thought, I think I can deal with it. But I think that time on the unit, seeing people go through those things, it did make me a little bit stronger for the time when it actually happened to us. For us it was very quick, and because I'd seen other parents go through it, we decided that we didn't want to go back onto the unit and spend like lots of hours and days just waiting for it. So once we were actually given the news that you know, they weren't going to be able to save him and medicine wasn't going to work, we just decided there and then that we wanted to remove his ventilator. And you know, we were asked, do you want to go back into the unit and sit and talk to him? And we said no, we didn't want those people to see us like I saw other people. So for us, we went into a family room and Harry was brought to us. And it was just so quick for him, so we knew really that it was obviously just the right time. He just wasn't strong enough. So we never had the situation where we had to go back to that hospital where Lottie had another baby still in the same unit. We obviously had Oscar in the original hospital where the twins were born, but it was different. We were quite relieved to return back to that hospital. We felt we had a good connection with that hospital, with the doctors and nurses, and actually once we'd got home and had a little bit of sleep, the first thing we wanted to do was go back to that hospital where we felt really quite safe and secure.
Yeah.
It's so important. So I think spending as much time as they need you to be there, obviously taking the cues from parents, it's their lead. You know, everybody's an individual and depends on beliefs, religion. Often, you know, it can be very different from one situation to the next. But being able to support parents in whatever they would like to do and facilitate that is the most important thing. And just encourage them to spend time with the baby if that's what they want to do, to bath the baby, to involve siblings and wider family, and have lots of memories, build memories, and
Like, although I knew that I'd given birth to Harry, I didn't really feel like he was mine because he'd always been so poorly. He was a month old when he died, so we had been able to do his cares, but always inside the incubator. I actually only held him for a minute when he was born, and I now know that the doctor made me do that because he thought he was the second born twin, he was the smallest, he wouldn't have been the strongest, and he just gave me that opportunity to have that hold. And then he was whisked away, but then we actually never got chance in the 30 days that Harry lived to hold him again until actually he was coming off the ventilator to take his last breaths.
Yeah.
Individual nurses, it will vary from person to person, and it's not something that you can really be adequately trained to do, but I'm certainly very keen in terms of what we can do as a network to maybe offer education opportunities. There are organisations, there are charities that are out there that do provide some training that at least give you some knowledge and equip you to try and deal with some of the things that you will face. But that's not to underestimate how upsetting it can be at the time, and I don't think that's a sign of weakness. I've cried myself. I think most neonatal nurses will admit to doing that, and that isn't a sign of weakness. That just shows that they care. At the end of the day, that this is something that touches them as well.
And you don't really think of yourself as a strong person, but actually looking back, I think you don't really get stronger than a mum who can go through something like that. And I think we should be quite proud that we've been able to experience that and come out the other side.
Yeah.
And for me, helping, supporting families through neonatal bereavement, it's all about just trying to give them the support. There's no real kind of words. You can't be trained to deal with that sort of situation. All you can do is try to show that you care and that you've been on a journey with them, and when the inevitable in many cases happens, that at least you make it as supportive an environment as you can. I think we've become much better at doing that. Really impact families. It can actually tear families apart. It's such a traumatic experience. So all we can do as neonatal professionals is try to be as supportive as possible in that sort of situation.
I just think, like, do you ever forget, like I often forget, that we had to give consent to withdraw care?
To sign that form, yeah.
To say, like, yes, turn everything off. And it's not something like, I think I block it out all the time. Like, you know, I'll see things in the news and they'll say, oh, like, you know, they've been asked to withdraw care on their child, and I always think, oh my God, that must be horrendous. And then I'm like, but we did that. Yeah. We withdrew care on Leo because he just wasn't. I mean, they were so sick. They had him like on an oscillator. They had him on all these drugs, and it was just, well, for me it was just a bit of a blur, really. Like, but I knew when I first saw him, which was like the first time I'd ever seen him, that like it wasn't ending well. Like, I can remember, like, he was just like being shook, like violently, because that's what it's like on the oscillator, isn't it? And I was thinking, oh, that's not how a child is supposed to breathe. Like, you're supposed to kind of like, you know, up and down. And I think at that moment it kind of like dawned on me that this really was happening. Like, he isn't going to make it. And it was just, I don't know, it was kind of like watching a nightmare unfold in front of you, but then like living it at the same time. It was just horrible. And
losing a child or baby on the unit, whether it happens within the first few days or weeks, or whether it's after they've left hospital and at home, can be very, very difficult to deal with. Well, initially you're losing the baby, there's the shock, there is the denial, there is the anger that comes from the injustice of losing a baby. You can also face depression, and the thing is, there's so many things to deal with, as well as the potential that you've lost, the potential of the first birthday, the birthdays, the graduation, the marriage, having grandchildren, You know, like there's so many aspects that probably people are not aware of until they actually face them. But what we like to do is to start early, is to talk about the baby, to talk about things that were important to the parents at the time and things that they can remember, doing memory boxes, where they can put in photos, they can have clothes, they can have little books, little teddies. There's also memory jars which are different colours, and there's verses that that maybe are appropriate that you can put in these memory boxes. But it's important to do that because it may be very, very difficult to look at them initially because all they bring is pain, but eventually they're going to bring comfort, and you're going to get a sense of peace from that.
I think you always hold on to that tiny bit of hope. You always think, but what if?
Yeah.
I know we got a phone call the week that Harry was took really ill and said, it's not good, you do need to come now. And the oscillator was his last kind of resort to get the fluid off his lungs and to help his breathing. And you do still have that tiny little bit of hope in your brain that yes, this could work, but then you have the huge daunting feeling of actually it probably isn't going to work.